everyone. This is the Buttercup Podcast where we talk about early childhood topics. My name is Marisa Macy, and I'm the host of the Buttercup Podcast. And today I'm so excited because I have a guest today. His name is Mr. Al Spain. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Spain.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Well, my guest today is the JetBlue co-founder, Mr. Al Spain, and he's also a faculty member at the University of Nebraska Kearney. His background reflects a career spanning general aviation, military, airline, and corporate aviation operations. Most recently, Mr. Spain is a faculty member at our very own UNK and served as a co-founder and senior vice president of operations of JetBlue Airways Corporation in New York. He retired from JetBlue in 2006, and prior to JetBlue, he was vice president of flight operations for Continental Micronesia Airlines, a subsidiary of Continental Airlines. Mr. Spain retired from Continental Airlines in 1998 after serving in Flight Standards and Training Division, as well as a captain in line flight operations. He was the FAA designated director of operations for both Continental Micronesia and JetBlue. He was domicile chief pilot for Oceanic Contractors, a privately owned airline operating in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and most recently, Mr. Spain served on the board of directors of Pinnacle Airlines Incorporated. Mr. Spain flew as a combat pilot in Vietnam, forward air controller, and among his awards are the Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Wow, that is awesome. Congratulations. I've only met one other Purple Heart person, and you're the second one, Mr. Spain. That is so cool. And Air Medal for Valor. His last military assignment was as Chief Flight Evaluation Branch, USAAVNS. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. U.S. Aviations?
U.S. Army Aviation School element.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. Mr. Spain has recently served the federal government's Joint Planning and Development Office as an independent assessment team member. He also was a member of the National Academies of Science, National Research Committee on Research and Development for Wake Turbulence, and NAOMS Review Committee. He currently serves on the FAA safety team, FAST, as a safety representative. He was previously involved with Civil Air Patrol at the wing and national levels. He is also working with Unmanned Aircraft System Development and is a member of the Association of Unmanned Vehicles International. Mr. Al Spain holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Louisiana Tech University and an MBA from Concordia University from Montreal, Canada. He is a senior member of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. He served as a member of the Industry Advisory Board of MIT's Global Aviation Industry Program and a member of the Aviation Department Advisory Committee of the State University of New York at Farmingdale. Mr. Spain served on the board of the Low Country Economic Development Alliance and the Beaufort County Airports Board. He previously served on the Aviation Management Advisory Board of Auburn University. He is a member of the National Association of Corporate Directors. Thank you, Mr. Spain, for being here today. And I know you said, I don't know why you're inviting me on your podcast because I'm not an early childhood educator. And then you said, well, we're all educators, really. And you are so right. And I'm so excited to talk to you today because you're the JetBlue co-founder and a business person, and you have a stellar background in aviation and military. And I think a lot of my students, past and present, are interested in what you have to say because of business. They want to open up their own businesses and have childcare centers and academies and schools of their own. And we can always learn more about business, because if the business part is not healthy, it's really difficult to do a good job with the children and the families. So I'm so excited to talk to you today. Can you talk a little bit about how you got started as an educator? You're here at UNK, and I'm so excited to hear your story.
I thought about that question, and when you just mentioned it, how did you get started as an educator? And I laugh. I say, well, I guess the first time was trying to teach my younger brother to play the ukulele, and that didn't go well. And I wasn't really sure that I wanted any part of educating. But as you mentioned, we are all educators in everything we do, and it's very, very important that we provide that mentorship and education to those that are coming behind us. But I think for me, as a commissioned officer, I in school I kind of admired teachers. Didn't agree with a lot of teachers sometimes, but I admired teachers, and it always was in the back of my mind that teaching was just so important, and wound up. And as an Army officer, I was fortunate enough to go to an organization, part of the Army, where we were sent back in order to teach. We were sent to a training system that was called Methods of Instruction, and it's a long course that preps you for teaching for teaching things like aerodynamics, and then teaching both in physical, where actually flying, but also the academic side. And I found out in that I enjoyed that. I wound up being an instructor for the Army for aviation, and that led to me being director of the evaluation branch. For every student that was coming through training, my staff was the one that did the evaluation of where we were in the educational process. So I really got into the teaching. Also, there was the ability to go to the classrooms, be in the classrooms in systems like navigation and aerodynamics and these types of classes, and teach there as well. So in 1970, when I came off of active duty, I was going to go back to school, going back to more academic work, and I wound up Louisiana Tech University was in the first beginnings of their aviation aerospace program, and the director of the program had asked me if I would work with them in this program to come teach, and they would work with me on getting at the time I was looking at master's and some more bachelor's work and things that I was trying to work on, and and the opportunity was to go teach at the university. So I really, that was my first foray into university academia, and I taught there. I taught aerospace systems and classroom, as well as working with their flight program, similar to what I had done in the Army, but it told me that I enjoyed it. And I taught there for 2 years, and so the question would become, well, why did you stop? Well, the young guys looking at the lure of the airlines, the lure of the other business side of things, and I always liked the leadership pieces that I had in the military. I liked the teaching, but I liked the leadership, the challenges of running a squadron or a flight or a division. And that to me I wanted to get back in and do that. So I accepted an offer to go over into business in a bank holding company that had several banks involved, because all I'd ever done was fly airplanes, and I wondered if I'd like something else. But the seed was planted there at Louisiana Tech, and it was always there, and it never did pop completely up. But as you mentioned, I never stopped teaching. I mean, even at the airlines, and I taught classes at the airlines. I taught many pieces that never did stop as far as education are concerned. Then when I retired, matter of fact, I've taken the retirement course 3 times, and I've failed it all 3 times. I can't retire. I've tried. It doesn't work. So
Lucky for us.
the last 11 years before I came to Kearney, I was working with the Air Force and Civil Air Patrol and Air Force in contracts and special operations. I was a commander of one of two flights that dealt with special ops for the support of the Army and Marine Corps and the Navy with air assets. And so that's what I've been doing for 11 years. So I tried to retire from that, and Carney popped up, and so I'm back teaching again, but enjoying every minute of it. That's kind of the long way around, but it's never stopped. You never stop teaching. So that's great to know that.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Spain. I have a brother who's a pilot. He's a captain at American Airlines, and he went to St. Louis University for his undergraduate, and that's where he got his training in aviation. And when he was a student there, I went to visit him, and he said, well, do you want to come to the classes with me? And I said, sure. So we went to a class on turbo engines. And as soon as the professor started talking, I had no idea what was being said. It was like they were speaking a different language. And then we went to another class called Cockpit Resource Management. And that was so cool because they told so many stories and I could understand the narratives. And I thought was such a fun class. So, I'm sure you've got awesome stories that your students are able to learn from and your expertise. And I'm so glad you didn't retire and that you're here with us. So thank you so much. So one of the things you talked about was leadership. And I'm sorry, I didn't put this in the notes, but when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, I want to ask Mr. Spain about this. What do you think makes a good leader?
I think that the my whole business of leadership is I'm a very strong proponent of what is known and being studied a bit now as servant leadership. I think you don't go sit in your office and tell people what to do, and that's no leadership. I did a speech here about servant leadership as one of the topics that I talked about. And I said, it's interesting that when I was commissioned in the Army, I went to Fort Benning, which is the infantry school. That is the biggest infantry school in the world. And officers from all over the world come there for training. And our unit patch, the one we wear on our shoulder on our uniform, was a blue shield with a sword on it. And it said, simply follow me. And you're going to be a leader. You need to be out in front. You need to be out where they can see you, where they understand that you know what they're doing and you appreciate their contributions to the goal of the corporation or the unit or whatever. But I think that servant leadership is the key. You gain the respect of the people that work for you as they begin to think that they're really working with you. And I think that makes a huge difference. Instead of going to work, I'm going to the project that I really want to be involved with. So the leadership piece, what makes a good leader is someone who listens, who's someone who understands that. In my case, I always tried to surround myself with people that were much smarter than I. And I think that made a big difference because they make me look good as the leader, but they are the biggest contributor to our success. And so that kind of sums up working with people in a short answer.
Thank you. What are ways to promote innovation in the workplace?
Innovation in the workplace. I think that in order to have that happen, I think the leaders, go back to that word again, the leaders, I don't say the managers, I like leaders. The leaders of the organization have to create a culture that fosters innovation. It's just that simple. You have to be open, you have to be willing to take ideas, you have to process the ideas with the people who bring them to you, but that's where innovation comes from. If people think that they can, if it's okay to come up with crazy ideas, then they will innovate. They have more ideas than I could ever come up with. And a quick example is we were starting JetBlue, still in the founding days of it, and following all the FAA regulations and everything that we had to do. And one of my directors in the marketing end of the world for us came up to me and said, "We've got an idea we want to think about." And I said, "What's the idea? Let's talk about it." And he said, "We want to be able to put live TV on the airplane." And I said, "Live TV on the airplane?" And I said, "You lost your mind, but go ahead with the plan and let's see what we've got." He said, "Well, we can do live TV. We can put antennas, special antennas on the airplane, and we can pick up the TV signals and have them at real time right now, that people who are in the city of New York or the city of Los Angeles that are looking at NBC, they will be seeing exactly on the airplane what they're seeing on the ground." And I said, "Oh, this really, how are we going to do this?" And they came up with, they had a company that had, in the early stages of developing the ability to have a mobile antenna on an airplane. Remember, we're going 500 miles an hour and we're trying to get this signal. And so we could shoot it up to the satellite, and we could tap off of the satellite feed for the networks while we were in flight. And I said, "Well, you know what? What an incredible idea. Let's give this thing a try." And we went up to get the funding to do this. And it turned out to be extremely successful. We were the only airline with live TV. And there are a dozen stories of how that innovation changed everything it's done on an airplane. And we wound up, we bought live TV. We bought the company Live TV. And we then owned the rights to put it on airplanes. And that allowed us to start deciding what other airlines were going to get this service. And they just buy it from us. But it was a thing that that kind of innovation, it wouldn't happen if there wasn't a culture that allowed that director to come to me, and he had been up through his chain of command and came over and said, "Look, let's try it. What do you think about trying this?" And I know in some of the bigger airlines, they said, "Never been done, can't be done." And that's where it would die. And it turned out to be an incredible thing for us. But today, that's become so antique that it's unreal, because now we can stream downward and still have internet connectivity, and stream actually get the same thing without all the satellite material and equipment and everything we had to have on each airplane. But it sure did make a difference in people flying on us because of that innovation. But you can't do it if the culture is not there. And the leadership, whether it's a small, tiny business or whether it's a major corporation, the leaders have to set that tone that innovation is okay here, and we want your ideas. And you do that by listening.
That is awesome. And what a great role model you are for creating that culture of leadership where people with ideas could come to you and be able to have a playground for ideas. Speaking of playground, up on your shelf are airplanes. Do you want to share what that's all about?
Well,
you want to share your toys with us, Mr. Spain?
They're up there.
Yes. Is that a JetBlue one on the left?
That's JetBlue on the left, and it starts over by the wall. The first one is an airline that a lot of younger people may have never heard of. But we started it right after deregulation. The Deregulation of Act was signed in 1978 by President Carter, and it deregulated the airline industry, and it allowed other people to try to start airlines. And that first one is People Express. And that was the first airline that I was involved with. And People Express was a discount carrier out of New York. I keep getting attracted back to New York, and now I'm in Kearney. It's completely different. But we were in New York with People Express, and we were building the airline. And I still think that we made mistakes. We grew too fast, and we were the darling, and we thought we were that we would no one could bother us, but we expanded way too fast and overloaded our capability. But the interesting part of it is we were attractive to other airlines as an acquisition because we had great crew members. You'll notice that I don't use the term employees. You'll find that I won't use the term employees. Our crew members and team members at People Express, we created a great airline, and Continental acquired us. So we were acquired by Continental Airlines, and I went from there. The second one up there is a Continental airplane, and I went to Continental as an instructor. An instructor, imagine that. Why would that happen? So I go as an instructor and a checked airman. They're called a check airman, a check pilot, and I was in the flight standards division there. And then I wound up going out to the Pacific as a chief pilot in the Pacific. So my job was everything that Continental Airlines operated west of Honolulu belonged to me as far as operations is concerned. And then we went through the second bankruptcy, and I think that was one of the really tough times. Continental had the second bankruptcy, and we couldn't find a way out of it, but we did by creating another airline called Continental Micronesia. And that was the old Continental Pacific operation, which was very profitable, very sustained customer base. And we carved that out, and I certified that. It's the second airline that I was involved with certification, but I was an operations officer, director of operations for that. And we created that airline to bail Continental out. Basically is what we were trying to do, is save Continental. So that second airplane was the Continental, then Continental Micronesia. And then I went back to graduate school and went back to Continental with the understanding I was going to go back to the Pacific. And it's crazy. People called me up and said, "You're the only ops guy we know that's crazy enough to talk to us about this. What do you think about let's start an airline?" And I said, "Okay, where are we going to do it?" And they said, "New York City." And I said, "Oh, well, back to New York again." So we formed a company called New Air Incorporated, and that became JetBlue. So the last airplane up there is JetBlue. So that's kind of my airplane routes. And if I brought the models in of all the ones that I flew, I would have to leave the office. There would be no room to sit.
That's so cool. Thank you. How can educators support children in developing financial literacy and an entrepreneurial mindset?
Wow. That's kind of it is related, but it kind of breaks into two questions, I think. I think financial literacy, that what I see now in freshmen coming in here, that I teach some freshman classes and then some others up to graduate, but I think for the financial literacy, I don't think they're exposed to it enough in the education process. And I say sometimes I think we need to stick with basic. When I was little, it was called reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I think that we don't do enough of that, and we do too much exploration with theories, and it bounces people around. They get here, they work in a store or a shop. They can't make change. They can't figure change without a computer. They don't like to read, and they don't. The writing has to be a computer. They can't sit down and write a note. And so I think those basics, and then exposure as they get into high school age, as to things like what is a checkbook, what is a bank account, just understand the importance of trade and wealth, meaning not money, but wealth beyond that into everything that's an asset. And that helps him understand the financial side of things. And the entrepreneurial mindset, I think that goes back to your innovation question. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to innovate. So it goes back to say, you've got to have an atmosphere. They've got to be willing to take chances as a young student, and even elementary, middle school, to be willing to have that innovation world open to them to explore beyond what I call a textbook answer. Always asking the question why, and that sets the mind in motion to say, I've got an idea. I think I'm going to try this idea. That's the entrepreneurial spirit. And I mean, we built JetBlue because we had an idea that we could do it better. Even before live TV, we thought we could do it better than anyone was doing it in the industry. So that idea and being willing to innovate and think about that, I think that's what kids need. I think that, and you had mentioned earlier, I made a note that you're talking about businesses, the business side of things, that some of your students are interested in having a business with childcare or with education, or they want to create this thing. And I would urge them not to be afraid. There are a lot of things they can do to look at gaining creating a business plan, and even if they want to start at home with a child care center at home, put a business plan together and look at all the elements of it, and that way you don't miss something. And I would suppose that something like a childhood care center would be almost as regulated as we are in airlines, and all the regulations, all the government properties that have to be taken care of. I think that that thing comes under that entrepreneurial spirit, the willingness to take a chance, the willingness to say, by golly, I've got an idea. If you don't try, you'll never know. And I can say we learn by mistakes. Try them. It didn't work. What do I got to do? What went wrong? What can I do better? And so don't be afraid to try to create the business, but do it with a business plan so you know where you're going, what you're trying to do. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Spain, I love that. Thank you. On last weekend, we went to the Nebraska State Fair in Grand Island, and it started pouring down rain at the end of our time there. And I kind of felt bad because we kept promising our daughter that we would take her on the rides at the end. Well, the rides were closed, and so we never got to go on the ride. So we're going to go back. But before we came back to Kearney, we went and did some shopping in Grand Island, and there was this neatest store in Grand Island, and the shop, it's a clothing store, and she has an apartment upstairs, and she was having a party. She caters parties upstairs in the apartment above the shop. So it was a big Husker game. The Huskers were in Ireland playing. And so she had a huge party up there, but she came down and opened the store for us, and we got to shop in there. And one side of the shop is all home goods, and then clothes on the other side. And she was visiting with us, and she said that when she wrote her business plan, I said, oh my gosh, you have the cutest salon over there. Is the salon open? She had a beauty shop. And she said, well, I only open the salon one day a week. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And she said, yeah, in my business plan, I wrote in there that I'd have the beauty shop as a way to fund the business in case, the clothing store didn't make enough money. I'd still have the, the beauty shop that would bring in revenue. And then took us to another part of the store where she's going to have a little tea room, and
Yep.
she's going to have pastries brought in, and this is going to open in a couple months. And then in this other area behind the store, she has outdoor parties. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is such a neat business plan. I wish I could read it. It sounded so interesting, but it all goes back to what you were saying about being creative, being innovative, having a growth mindset, and put it down on paper and don't be afraid. And she was not afraid at all. And she's just got so many creative, imaginative ideas for what she's doing there in Grand Island.
That's great. That's great.
Who's one person who inspires you?
I think the one, and it's not somebody who really anybody knows, but I look back over a career, and when I was at Continental Airlines, and I was a check airman, and then when I went to the Pacific as the chief pilot over there, my boss was a gentleman named Donald Breeding, and Don was the senior vice president of operations for Continental Airlines. And he sent me out to be the chief pilot in the Pacific. And then later on, when we created that second Continental airline out there, he came out there as the CEO and president, which I was, yay, this is great. He was one who you could always go talk to. He always wanted to know what you thought about things. And he was in times of trouble and incidents and things that happen in airlines where it's, oh my goodness, here we got another one, something else has gone on. He was always the calm, cool head that said, all right, what do you want to do? How are we going to work this out? What do you think? And he always had a plan in mind, but he wanted to know yours. And that was a mentoring that, and I think about it, and at the time, I was by then 50 years old, and yet he still was receptive of my ideas and the ability to handle situations was a huge impact on me later on, going through the bankruptcy, going through building JetBlue and all these other things I've taken on, because and then he today, I'll talk to him and he say, what's your plan for this? What are you thinking about that? So he's the one that just pops into my mind, and I love him for it because of the kindness and the generosity and the willingness to work as I came along. He's about 10 years older than I am, and so he was a great role model.
That is awesome. Thank you. And you've lived and worked all over the world. Is there anything that you have taken away from those experiences? Different cultures, different languages.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing, and did I start this later on? No, not really. I was born in Galveston, Texas in 1944. And in the late 1940s, we moved to Tampico, Mexico. And that's where I was going to be a little child, in Tampico, Mexico. And so I knew early on that there are cultural differences, there are people differences, there are differences. And so that was the beginning of my, as my wife Sandy says, oh, rootless one, you never stop moving. And so I think the biggest thing is recognition of differences and understanding that we're different, and understanding that the cultures are different, and we have a right, God-given or inalienable, however you want to put it, we have a right to make our own decisions. They have a right to make their decisions, but we have to respect each other. And I think that's what's fallen down. And I think that I've learned that the cultures are different. I learned that we can find common ground if we talk about it. If we don't talk about it, we'll never find common ground. I think that our son was young he was born in 1970, and then we went to Dubai in 1975. No one even knew where it was. There was no skyscraper there. There was a desert, and so he learned early on as well that there's a huge difference in cultures. And I think that that's the biggest thing is understanding that we're all different, but we can all contribute. And goes back to that innovation. Let me listen to somebody else, some other culture. They may have a great idea, and I'm willing to listen. So the world is great. What I do come away from it with, and I'm a bit prejudiced, I think, but I still think the United States of America is the greatest place on earth. And we have things that people don't even know about and understand. And I'm proud to be an American. And I believe that we make mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes in our history, but it's better here than I've seen in so many places. And do we want to help them change their standard of living? Yes. But it goes back to, they have to have first, they have to have property rights, they have to have rule of law, and then they can make the transition. But if they don't have that, it doesn't matter what happens, what kind of money you want to pour into it, it'll never work without those two things to begin the process. But this is the greatest place, and I have no doubt about that. And having lived there and other places all over the world, this is it.
Thank you. And one of my last questions, Mr. Spain, is what's been the highlight of your career so far? I know it's a corny question. You've got a lot of things that you could probably talk about, but is there anything that stands out for you, or something that you're just really
I think the highlights are then superseded by another highlight, or superseded by another highlight, and you think this is the greatest of ever. You know, I've thought about it a little bit. I think as far as feeling like an achievement, I can't describe the feeling that you get when you work to put together something like an airline, and the Federal Aviation Administration hands over the air operating certificate to you in a ceremony. I mean, it's awesome. And so I've been involved in 3 of those, and and it's each of them is a highlight. JetBlue obviously is a huge highlight, and I think that if I had to pick something that I felt like really accomplishing things that was more so in the second bankruptcy I talked about in Continental, we made the decision to create that airline out of Continental. And the problem with it was there was all kind of legal precedent and business practice for merging companies together. But there were no guidelines for the FAA, for all of these other, for the Department of Justice, for the Department of Transportation, for the FAA. There were no precedents how to separate an airline. And I wanted to create this airline and make this airline a mirror image of this airline, but with a different certificate. And they just kind of threw up their hands. It can't be done. You can take this away and make a new airline, but you can't mirror this one. And we did. And that was a huge success. And that, to me, was a business highlight, to be able to do that when it couldn't be done. Then the second thing is kind of personal, but in 1994, we had planned to fly a lot of people to Guam. I was in Guam, my office was in Guam. It was the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Guam in July of 94. July of 44, US forces invaded Guam and were able to capture it back from the Japanese, where they had interred all of these Guamanians, Chamorro, and all the people were there. So this 50th anniversary was a huge thing. And long story short, we had about 600 or 700 people coming back out, and we were going to fly our wide body airplanes, the DC-10s and the 747s, to take them from Honolulu. They were going to meet in Honolulu, and then we would fly them to Guam in a process that was going to take all day. At the last week, our reservations people at Continental had called and said, we got a problem, and the problem is that we've got 80 people more than we've got seats. I said, well, how about that? What a challenge. Can't strap people on the wings, can't put them in the cargo hold. So what we'll do is I'll take a 727, which can't go nonstop from Honolulu to Guam, and I'll take it over there. It gives me 140 seats. And we will go to Honolulu, and I'll make a cargo run going, and I can stop in a couple of islands and offload cargo and then go over there. And then coming back, we'll make it a World War II remembrance trip. We'll stop at Johnston Island, we go to Kwajalein, Koh Sarai, all these other islands. And because we had to stop and get fuel. But these guys fought out there. And these people are, you know, they were getting on up in age. So we got to Honolulu, and they said, I said, I don't know if it's going to work or not. He said, and the station manager came up and said, we do have a problem with this airplane, the passenger load. And I said, what's the problem? And I said, nobody wants to get on it. He says, no, everybody wants to get on it. They don't want to go on the nonstop flights. They want to go on each island. And so it turned out I took 80, and then the press decided they wanted to fly with us. So I took all the press plus the 80 survivors of that World War II experience. And we started off going through the islands. And it was one of the most touching experiences ever. It just jumps out that these guys would come up and talk to me. I'd go back, and flight attendant came up, and of course this is a charter, and in the charter we don't have to lock the door because we know everybody who's on the airplane. So they were able to come up and talk to us while we were up en route in altitude. And flight attendant came up and said, hey, you know, in our Continental magazine, there's this picture of the guy finding the plaque of the Marine barracks in Guam when they liberated it. I said, yeah, that's it right there. And he's right back here in the airplane. He wants to talk to you. And I said, you got to be kidding me. So we went back there. Well, the press went nuts over this. And he and I are standing there. I'm taking him back. And he had the original picture that was in our magazine of them finding that Marine barracks plaque in the rubble in Guam. So he had the picture. And when we swapped, when they took the pictures, I had the original in front of me, and this gentleman had the magazine with that picture 50 years later in the magazine. And it went, events like that on that trip all the way out were unbelievable. We stopped in Kwajalein, and they had a special service at the chapel. I had to get up and walk out. I couldn't get, I mean, they were getting to me. And we did all kinds of things. We had built a scenario of everything that happened in the Pacific. And as we flew over those latitude, longitude on our navigation systems, I would say this is where the aircraft were launched in the raid against Truk Island. And we're right at that point. And one of the passengers in the back was a World War II pilot that flew the raids in Truk and launched from that carrier. So, I mean, one thing after another, and I think that was the highlight. The next night after the night we got back there to Guam, we got to Guam, and these people were taken into all the hotel accommodations and everything else. And then that night, there was an aircraft carrier that was in the harbor at Apra, and we were invited to a dinner on there honoring all of these veterans. And I met the commandant of the Marine Corps, and he said, Captain, I understand you had quite an experience coming out here today. And I said, General, there's no word for it. I said, I used 92,000 pounds of jet fuel and 4 boxes of Kleenex to get here. So these guys got to me. So it was
Oh,
great. But those are the kind of, if you want highlights, they're more. Every time I do something, I tell you, Carney's a highlight. It really is. I love what we're doing here. I think it's great. I get to teach in business school and get to teach aerospace as well. You couldn't ask for any more. It's a highlight. It's what you make it.
yes, it's what you make it. And thank you for sharing, Mr. Spain. I think in probably every workforce, people have highs and lows and challenges, and it's those kind of memories, the highlights that keep you going when things are difficult. And I know in early childhood workforce, it can be really challenging. And like what I heard you say is, there's lots of regulations, there's lots of things that make difficult and challenging situations for us. Is there some advice you have for staying the course and keeping motivation and the love for what we do? Is there any practices you use or strategies or advice you might have?
Well, I think I try to stay pretty much focused. And if we've got a challenge before us, how are we going to fix this? What are we going to do? We can't run away. You can't turn around and walk away. You can. That's not a secret for success. So how are we going to stay focused on the challenge? And I think that it's different with every person. Every person, you talk about resiliency, about the ability to bounce back. And so you're going to get these things that happen. How do you bounce back? I mean, nothing, COVID is a bigger scale, but I'm going to tell you, on September 11th, when that World Trade Center got hit, I had no earthly idea what you talk about a challenge. We had never foreseen anything like that, ever. And so everything was this challenge, focus, determination, and you stick with it. Otherwise, we'd have just said, oh, well, what are we going to do? We can't do anything. So we were immediately trying to figure out. I had airplanes scattered all over the country, places where I never had any service support or anything. And what are we going to do? Number one was, I'm going to take care of the customer. We got to do something to help the customers. And so we spent a lot of money doing that. But it's the challenge. It's staying with that determining, let's go, let's get a plan, back to my plan, have a plan, and you may have to make the plan on the fly, but figure the plan out, stick with it. And if it's not working, figure the alternative, and don't give up.
Yes, don't give up. Thank you so much, Mr. Spain. It's such a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much. And how can listeners follow you? I know you're going to be talking at a conference soon.
I don't participate in the social media end of the world. Got a little frustrated with that, and I do better off without it. I think I like to talk to people. I like to write to people. I like to communicate. Absolutely, but the media are so truncated. It's just not. It's not really communications. So I think my email. My email. I'm spain@unk.edu. Anybody can send me an email and we'll communicate. And that may mean a phone call. That may mean we do a Zoom. If somebody has a specific question, they want to look at something or want research or ask about things, and certainly get me through the email here at the UNK. And then there's nothing closed as far as coming into the office. Folks can come in and ask to see me, and I'm here. When I'm not in class, I'm pretty much here.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Spain. And I want to do what you're doing. I have my dream job here at UNK also, and I never want to retire. I want to keep going and never give up and just live a good life. And I admire you for what you're doing. I think it's so awesome.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
inspiring students. And if my students want to come in and sit in on one of your classes, they can send you an email and ask you, or if they have a question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm teaching aviation law this semester, the law course, and then teaching the commercial operations piece of it, as well as the 126 capitalism. I teach a capitalism class and in the business school. So all of them there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Spain.
Have a great day.
Thank you.